The sun hadn't yet risen when Amara slipped out of the small wooden shack she called home. At 12 years old, her shoulders already knew the weight of responsibilities too heavy for childhood. Inside, her mother lay on a thin mat, her breathing shallow and labored, weakened by illness that had stolen her strength months ago. Amara gripped the handles of 2 empty plastic jugs, their worn surfaces testimony to countless trips before this one. The nearest clean water source was 3 miles away, through terrain that made her heart race with fear every single day. But there was no choice. Her mother needed water for her medicine, for drinking, for survival. The path began innocuously enough, winding through the edge of their village, where a few early risers might offer a sympathetic nod. But soon it descended into the ravine, where loose rocks made every step treacherous. Amara had learned to move carefully, testing each foothold, remembering the time she'd fallen and limped home with a twisted ankle and empty jugs. Beyond the ravine lay the abandoned industrial area, a maze of crumbling buildings and rusted machinery. This was where her fear intensified. Men gathered here, desperate men with hollow eyes who sometimes called out to her, their words making her skin crawl. She'd learned to walk quickly but not run, to appear confident while terror thundered in her chest. Twice, men had followed her. Once, a group of older boys had tried to take her jugs, laughing as she pleaded. She'd escaped by darting through a gap in a fence too small for them to follow. But she'd returned home empty-handed that day, crying into her mother's frail arms, "Why don't you ask someone for help?" Her mother had whispered, "Who would help us?" Amara had replied, "They had no family, no friends with resources to spare." Everyone in their village struggled. Everyone carried their own burdens. So each dawn, Amara made the journey alone. She'd memorized every potential hiding spot, every route of escape. She walked with keys gripped between her fingers like her mother had taught her, ready for threats she shouldn't have to face. But she walked, because love demanded it, because her mother needed her, because sometimes survival meant walking through danger. Even when you were just a child who should have been walking to school instead. It was a Thursday when everything changed. Though Amara wouldn't understand the significance until much later, she'd made it through the ravine and was approaching the industrial area, her senses heightened as always. The morning mist hung thick, muffling sounds and creating shadows that played tricks on her anxious mind. That's when she noticed him, a tall man with weathered skin and kind eyes. Standing near one of the abandoned buildings, he wore simple clothes and carried a camera around his neck. A foreigner, she realized, probably a journalist or photographer documenting poverty. Like the others who occasionally passed through and never stayed. Their eyes met for just a moment before Amara looked away quickly. Walking faster, she'd learned not to trust strangers, especially men, especially here. But something made him different. Perhaps it was the way his expression shifted when he saw her, not with pity or indifference, but with a sharp recognition of something wrong. He watched as she hurried past, clutching her empty jugs, her small frame tense with wariness. Marcus Chen had been documenting water scarcity for 3 weeks, but he'd never seen a child traveling alone this early, through such dangerous territory. His journalist instincts told him there was a story here, but something deeper, something human made him concerned. He didn't call out to her. He didn't follow. He simply watched which direction she went and felt a weight settle in his chest. The next morning, Marcus was there again, and again he saw Amara walking the same path, jugs in hand. This time he noticed the way she scanned every shadow, the defensive set of her shoulders, the adult alertness in a child's body. He watched from a distance as she navigated the industrial area, saw how she skirted around a group of men, how quickly she moved. On the third morning, Marcus positioned himself differently, wanting to see where this child's journey ended. He followed at a great distance, careful not to alarm her, and watched as she reached a small, protected spring nearly 3 miles from where he'd first seen her. She filled her jugs with painstaking care, as if the water were liquid gold. Then she began the return journey, and Marcus understood she would walk 6 miles total, carrying water that would grow heavier with each step, through dangerous territory, alone. "Dear God," he whispered, "how many times has she done this?" That afternoon, Marcus made inquiries in the village. An elderly woman told him about Amara and her sick mother, about their isolation, about the daily journey no one seemed able or willing to help with. Someone should do something, the woman said with a helpless shrug. But Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing those wary eyes, that small figure carrying burdens too heavy for childhood. Marcus had covered war zones, natural disasters, and humanitarian crises across 3 continents. He'd built a career on observing and documenting, maintaining professional distance while telling important stories. But something about Amara's situation had broken through his carefully constructed barriers. The next morning, he didn't just observe, he positioned himself along her route, in a visible spot where she'd see him from a distance, holding 2 new, sturdy water jugs and a folding wagon. When Amara spotted him, she stopped abruptly, her body tensing for flight. Marcus held up his hands in a peaceful gesture and stayed where he was, not approaching. "Please," he called out in her language, which he'd learned passably well. "I'm not here to hurt you. I've watched you make this journey. It's too dangerous, too hard. Let me help. Amara stared at him, every instinct screaming danger. Strangers who offered help always wanted something in return. She'd learned this lesson well. I don't want anything from you, Marcus continued, as if reading her thoughts. I'm a journalist. I tell stories. But sometimes stories aren't enough. Sometimes we have to actually help. Why? The word came out harsh, defensive. Why would you help me? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Because you're a child who should be in school, not walking through danger every day. Because your mother is sick and you're alone. Because I can help, and that means I should. The simplicity of his answer caught Amara off guard. No pity, no religious conversion attempt, no hidden agenda, just a straightforward acknowledgement that help was needed and available. Still, she didn't move. Trust wasn't easily given when survival depended on caution. Marcus set down the jugs and wagon. I'll leave these here. Use them or don't. But I'll be here tomorrow too, and the day after. If you'll let me, I'll walk with you. I'll help carry. I'll make sure you're safe. He paused. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Then he did something that surprised her. He walked away, leaving the supplies behind. He didn't pressure her, didn't demand gratitude, didn't insist on immediate acceptance. Amara stood frozen for several minutes after he left, staring at the wagon and jugs. Part of her wanted to ignore them, to maintain her hard-won independence. But another part, the exhausted, frightened child she tried so hard to hide, wanted desperately to accept. Slowly, carefully, she approached the supplies. The jugs were sturdy, far better than her cracked plastic ones. The wagon was small but solid, with good wheels that would make the journey easier. That day, for the first time in months, Amara's journey was slightly less burdensome, and when she returned home and told her mother about the strange man's offer, her mother cried not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief that someone, finally, had seen them. Marcus kept his promise. Every morning for a week, he was there, maintaining a respectful distance, but always visible, always available. He never pushed, never demanded anything. He simply showed up. On the 8th day, Amara spoke to him. You can walk behind me, she said quietly. Far behind. If you try to get closer, I'll run. Thank you, Marcus replied simply, honoring the trust being offered. So they established a pattern. Marcus walked 50 feet behind Amara, close enough to intervene if danger appeared, far enough that she felt safe. He carried supplies, bottles of clean water he purchased in town, protein bars, a first aid kit. When the men in the industrial area saw him, they left Amara alone. His presence, silent and steady, became a shield. After 2 weeks, Amara let him walk beside her. After 3, she let him carry one of the jugs. As they walked, they talked. Amara learned that Marcus had a daughter back home, about her age. He showed her a photo, a smiling girl with braces and a soccer uniform. She has everything, Marcus said softly. Good school, clean water from the tap, safety, and you have none of those things, but you're so much braver than she probably ever need to be. His voice carried both sadness and admiration. That's not fair. That's not right. Amara shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. It's just how things are. But it doesn't have to be, Marcus replied. He'd been making inquiries, learning about the village's water situation. The spring Amara walked to wasn't even the closest water source. It was simply the only clean one accessible without passing through even more dangerous territory. The village had applied for funding for a well 3 times. But corruption and bureaucracy had swallowed every attempt. Marcus began documenting Amara's journey. With her permission, he photographed the treacherous ravine, the abandoned industrial area with its lurking dangers, the spring where clean water flowed freely, just 3 miles from people dying of preventable diseases. He interviewed Amara's mother, recording her quiet dignity as she spoke about watching her daughter face dangers daily while she lay helpless. He spoke with village leaders, with the elderly woman who'd first told him about Amara, with other children who made similar journeys to different water sources. I'm going to tell your story, Marcus promised Amara. And maybe, if enough people see it, things will change. Amara had learned not to hope for too much. But as they walked together each morning, the journey feeling less frightening with Marcus beside her, she allowed herself to imagine a different life. School, friends, mornings spent being a child instead of a survivor. Do you really think people will care? She asked one day. Marcus thought about his editor, about readers who consumed stories with their morning coffee and then moved on. He thought about all the stories he'd told that had sparked outrage but not action. I don't know, he answered honestly, but I'm going to try. And while I'm trying, you won't walk alone anymore. Marcus's article appeared in an international publication 6 weeks after he first saw Amara. The photographs were powerful. A small girl, navigating dangerous terrain. Determination and fear mingled in her expression, carrying water that should have simply flowed from a tap. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, donations poured in from around the world. People who'd never thought about where their water came from suddenly understood the privilege they'd taken for granted. They saw Amara and thought of their own children, their own sisters, their own younger selves. a humanitarian organization that had been working in the region, contacted Marcus. They'd been trying to fund a well project in Amara's village for 2 years, blocked by local bureaucracy. But international attention and funding changed the political calculations overnight. Suddenly, officials who'd been obstacles became facilitators. 3 months after their first meeting, Marcus and Amara stood together, watching drilling equipment arrive in the village. A proper well, with a pump and purification system, would be installed in the village center. No more dangerous journeys. No more children walking alone through terrain that harbored threats. Amara's mother, stronger now with proper medication that Marcus had helped arrange, stood beside them. Tears streamed down her face as she watched her daughter's daily nightmare coming to an end. "Thank you," she whispered to Marcus for the 100th time. "Don't thank me," Marcus replied. "Thank Amara." Her courage told the story. "I just shared it, but it was more than a well." The attention had brought other changes. A mobile medical clinic would now visit the village monthly. A school program was being established. The village that had been forgotten was suddenly visible, and with visibility came resources and protection. Other journalists arrived, wanting to tell similar stories about other children in other villages facing similar struggles. The water crisis that had been abstract statistics became personal narratives that demanded action. Marcus prepared to leave, his work in the region complete. On his last day, Amara gave him a drawing she'd made, a girl walking through shadows toward light, accompanied by a figure who represented safety. "You saw me," she said simply. "Everyone else looked away, but you saw me." Marcus knelt to her level, emotion thick in his throat. "You deserved to be seen. Every child does. And you taught me something important, that sometimes the most important stories aren't the ones about wars or politics. Sometimes they're about one brave girl who walked through danger every day, because she loved her mother." Before he left, Marcus made arrangements. Amara would attend school, with her fees covered by a scholarship fund set up by readers of his article. Her mother would receive ongoing medical care. The village would be monitored to ensure the promises made were promises kept. 10 years later, Marcus received an email. Amara, now 22, had graduated from university with a degree in civil engineering. She'd specialized in water systems and was working with the same humanitarian organization that had drilled her village as well. "I design water systems for villages like mine," she wrote. "I make sure no other child has to walk through danger for something as basic as water. You showed me that one person who cares can change everything. Now I'm trying to be that person for others." Attached was a photo of Amara standing beside a newly installed well in another village. Surrounded by children who would never know the fear she'd once lived with, Daily. Marcus hung the photo in his office. A reminder that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is simply see someone who needs help and decide they deserve it. Amara had walked through danger alone, but one person's decision to help hadn't just saved her, it had created ripples that continued to spread, bringing hope and help to countless others who'd been invisible for far too long. Sometimes changing the world begins with seeing one person struggle and deciding to do something about it. The end.